June 24th, 2011, Friday. Maureen poked her head out of the kitchen and called out, "Rose, could you open the door? I'm really busy right now." The teenager looked at her mother pointing to the front door and grimaced. Reluctantly, she got up from the couch and took off her iPod headphones. Standing at the door were a tall man in a suit and a police officer in uniform. "How can I help you?" The man in the suit replied, "Hello, is Jason Woods here?" "1 minute," Rose said, turning away. She covered her mouth with her hands and screamed, "Dad, the police are here!" Almost immediately, Jason came out of the kitchen wearing an apron and wiping his hands on a kitchen towel. "What did you say?" "Dad, the police." She smiled and pointed over her shoulder at the door. "Oh my God, you're in big trouble. Get out of here. Go help your mom in the kitchen. Now get out of here." He slapped the girl on the bottom as she ran past him. "Good evening, I'm Jason Woods. How can I help you?" "I'm Detective Scanlon, and this is Officer Pellegrino," said the man in the suit, holding out his badge and ID. "Can we come in?" "Of course, come in. Sorry about the mess. It's my daughter's wedding tomorrow, and someone forgot to tell the caterer about the South Sea cabbage dish or something. And we're trying to get everything ready. Let me give you a little piece of advice. Never have daughters, and if you do, never let them get married. It's too expensive, and they'll drive you all crazy in the end." "I heard that," a excited female voice called from another room. "Damn, now I'm in trouble. Anyway, how can I help you?" "I'm sorry to bother you at this time, but are you Mr. Woods?" All the blood drained from Jason's face and his hands dropped limply to his sides. The towel fell to the floor. He stood there in that hallway, staring in shock at the two people standing in front of him. "Honey, who was at the door?" A pretty middle-aged blonde woman in a similar apron came out of the kitchen to Jason. "Hello, I'm Maureen," she said, extending her hand to the two officers. "Oh, wait. If you don't want your hands covered in papaya, wait a minute." Bending down, she picked up a towel from the floor and began to wipe their hands. Only then did she notice the pallor and expression on her husband's face. "Jason, what's going on?" "Are you Mrs. Woods?" the police officer asked. "Yes." "We have news about the first Mrs. Woods, Alicia." Now the paleness drained from her face and she turned to her husband. "Oh God, no. Mr. Woods, Mrs. Woods, I don't know if this is good news or not, but Alicia Woods has been found alive and is living in Washington State. We received a fax from the Seattle Police Department, and she is in custody in connection with the death of her husband. A fingerprint check revealed that she was reported missing in 1987. She is now known as Christine Marks, but she has been identified. Alicia Woods is now Christine Marks." The detective took a breath and waited for a reaction to his news. The silence in the hallway was eerie. No one moved. No one reacted. It was as if time had stopped and everyone was frozen in place. Maureen continued to stare at her husband, tears glistening in his eyes, unsure whether to fall or not. Maureen broke the heavy silence. "Thank you, officer. I don't know what to say. We'll need some time to... You understand what I mean. It's too much to take in all at once." "I understand, ma'am. We only have one fax from Seattle, but I'm sure there will be more. We had to pull the files from the archives to understand what we're dealing with. After all, it's been 24 years. I was in elementary school when all this happened. As soon as we know more, we'll be in touch if that's okay with you." "Of course, officer. Call or stop by any time," Maureen said. "We want to know what's going on as much as you do. Thanks for stopping by." As they left, the officers closed the door carefully and disappeared into the darkness. Jason hadn't moved since he heard Alicia's name. Maureen hugged her stunned husband and rested her head on his shoulder. When a drop of water fell on her head, she cried too. They stood in the doorway like statues, seemingly for hours, but in reality only a few minutes had passed. A cry from the kitchen brought one of them back to reality. "Mom, something's boiling." Maureen looked at Jason. "Honey, why don't you go lie down? Rose and I will finish in the kitchen. I'll be up in a few minutes and we'll talk. Okay?" Without saying a word, Jason turned and went upstairs. When he turned the corner, the bedroom door closed quietly. "Why now?" Maureen sighed. "God, tell me what he did to deserve this. Tomorrow was supposed to be a happy day and now it's ruined. God, help my Jason." Maureen wiped her tears with a dirty napkin and returned to rescuing her daughter from the boiling pot. An hour later, a hastily prepared dinner was ready, and Maureen was able to go upstairs. When she opened the bedroom door, she was met by darkness. In the light coming from the hallway, She saw Jason sitting in an old armchair by the window. He was still wearing his apron, his head was bowed, his hands were folded on his knees. Maureen walked over to her seated husband and knelt down in front of him. She tried to see his eyes, but they were hidden in the shadows. She stood up, put her hands on his shoulders, and listened to his breathing. He was breathing. That was good. She waited a moment before speaking. They sat together in the darkness for what seemed like an eternity. This time, an hour passed, not a few minutes. Maureen looked up and broke the grim silence. "Honey, look at me, please look at me." Jason tilted his head a couple of inches and looked at the beautiful woman hugging his legs. "I know what you're going through, and I understand how much it hurts. God, I understand your pain. I don't know what you're thinking, but I can guarantee you one thing. I'm here for you, and I'll always be here. I will never abandon you. We will get through this together, you and me. Together, the two of us." Perhaps Maureen wanted to see what she thought she saw, but in the dim light of the room, it seemed to her that one corner of his mouth lifted slightly. That barely perceptible smile was a ray of light in her heart. "Jason, listen to me. Tomorrow is a very important day, and I don't want anyone to ruin it. We have to pretend that nothing happened and that the police didn't come until after the wedding. You can do it. I know you can. You're strong. If you need to, you can lean on me. I'm here for you. And then we'll deal with Alicia." Looking into her eyes, he forced the pain into a corner of his mind. Right now, only one thing mattered to him: his daughter's wedding. He would deal with the pain later. He would need Morin's help, but she had promised to be there for him, and he believed her. Jason spoke for the first time since he had gone upstairs. "I love you." He took one hand off hers and gently ran the back of his fingers across her cheek. "Let's go to bed. We have to get up early, and it's going to be a very long day. I don't want our daughter to see anything but smiles, at least until she finds some other emergency that causes her to panic at the last minute." 24 years ago, May 19th, 1987, Tuesday. Jason sat cross-legged on the floor with little Bethany on his lap, watching a Disney cartoon on the new VCR. Bethany was as happy as a 3-year-old girl can be, watching Chip and Dale run around the screen. Every now and then, she tried to imitate their squeaky voices. Dad loved watching her every second. Bethany's older brother sat on the couch, intently playing a new handheld electronic game called Space Invaders. Jeremy was so absorbed in killing aliens that he didn't hear the tornado that swept through the living room, the TV, or the screams of a 3-year-old girl. Jason was in heaven, and heaven was where his family was. On Tuesdays and Thursdays, he had to pick up the kids from the babysitter. But he didn't mind. He loved spending time with them and used Tuesdays and Thursdays as an excuse to sit on the floor and play. His wife worked late 2 days a week, and Alicia didn't get home until 7, so he was also in charge of dinner. That usually meant sloppy joes, hamburger helper, hot dogs, or whatever he could whip up. Tonight it was macaroni and cheese. It was delicious. "Did you make dinner for me?" Alicia asked, standing in the doorway and smiling at all three of them. "Mommy!" squealed little Bethany, reaching out her arms to be picked up. Alicia bent down, kissed Jason on the top of his head, picked up her beautiful, squealing little girl, and hugged her tightly. Jeremy didn't take his eyes off the game. Jason stood up and sighed, stretching his stiff legs. He tried to kiss his wife, but the girl shifted from foot to foot, and no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't get close to her lips. "How was your day?" Jason asked. "Nothing to tell? Another dead man? Another inheritance to liquidate? How about you?" "Much better," he replied, hugging the tall brunette from behind and kissing her neck. "Come in and sit down. I made you dinner. Wait, I'll heat it up in the microwave." When the table was set and dinner was served, Alicia sat down. "Wine and macaroni and cheese? How can you be a foodie?" "I just thought you might want to relax a little. You've been so nervous lately. Oh, and this wine is from a bottle, not a box. It's the best." "Wow, it's only Tuesday. Are you trying to get me drunk so you can make fun of me later?" "If so, bring the bottle over here and pour it." "Okay, I'll fill your glass." Jason watched Alicia eat silently, never taking his eyes off her. He couldn't get enough of her. The sight of her made his heart skip a beat. Her touch sent shivers down his spine. Even the scent of her perfume made his knees weak. There was nothing about Alicia that didn't turn him into a trembling jelly. To him, she was the most beautiful woman on earth. She was his whole world. He adored her so much that everything else in his life was insignificant compared to her. After Jason put the children to bed, he had a chance to sit in silence and enjoy his wife's company. They curled up on the sofa, chatting and finishing the last drops of wine. When the kids are asleep, let's go upstairs and start preparing the third course, Jason whispered in her ear. Jason, I think we need to focus all our attention on the two we have. We have to make sure they grow up strong and healthy. Another child and we will go crazy. Let's just go to bed and enjoy each other. Make love to me and don't worry about having more children, okay? Yes, I know, Jason admitted. It's just that when I'm lying on the floor playing with the babies, I think about how much fun we're having. And if two children are this much fun, imagine how much fun 3, 4, or 5 would be. I just want you to lie down on the floor and chase them around the room. Then you'll understand what I mean. I've never done anything more enjoyable in my life except maybe giving birth to them. I'm tired and I don't want to talk about it anymore, Alicia complained, snuggling up to his shoulder and hugging him tightly. I just want to hold you and make love like we're the last people on earth, like tomorrow will never come. Like it's the last time in our lives. Just hold me and tell me you love me. I love you, Alicia Woods. May 20, 1987, Wednesday. Jason's workday was filled with the usual chaos. One employee was sick, another was out of town for training, and one of the secretaries had a big fight with her boyfriend and started crying every half hour. As a result, Jason was the only one left to do everyone else's work, at the expense of his own. The situation was so crazy that he was working on 3 urgent tasks at once and skipping lunch. When one of the secretaries called to tell him he had a phone call, he sat down for the first time all day and said more than one sentence. This is Jason, how can I help you? Hello, Mr. Woods, this is Tracy. I've been trying to reach Mrs. Woods to find out what time she'll be picking up Jeremy and Bethany today, but I haven't been able to get through. Do you know what time she'll be? I think the usual 3 o'clock. Why? It's already 4, and I have a meeting at 5:30 on the other side of town. I need to pick them up soon. I'll call her and check. If necessary, I'll come and pick them up myself. I'll call you back in a minute. After hanging up, Jason called his wife's office. M&P Estate Liquidations. Barbara Ross speaking. Hi, Barb, it's Jason. Is Alicia there? Hi, Jason. I don't know. I haven't seen her today. Hold on. I'll ask Harry. The phone was left on the desk while Barbara talked to several people in the office. Jason, I'm sorry. She's not here. We don't know where she is. I thought she was with a client working on some paperwork, but Harry said he was there and she wasn't with him. No one has seen her today. I looked outside. Her car is in the parking lot, but she's not in the building. Is there anything I can do to help? Thanks, Barb, but no. She was supposed to pick up the kids today and she's late. I'll just go get them and take them home. If she comes back soon, tell her I have the kids and to call me. Jason was glad to have an excuse to get out of his crazy office. Picking up the kids was the perfect excuse. But Alicia wasn't the type to forget to pick up her kids. Every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, she arrived at the babysitter's at exactly 3 o'clock. Today, she wasn't there. After driving the kids home and settling them in front of the TV, Jason called Alicia at work again. She still wasn't there. He called her best friend Linda, but she hadn't spoken to Alicia in a couple of weeks either. He even called his mother, hoping she had spoken to her today. She knew no more than anyone else. It took several more calls to find a babysitter who could come right away. A girl from the next street looked after the children, and Jason got in his car and drove to Alicia's work. He parked next to her car and looked inside. There was nothing unusual. The usual trash on the passenger seat, a coat and a pair of gloves on the back seat. The doors were locked too. Jason went inside and talked to everyone, but no one knew anything. He began to worry because this behavior was unusual for Alicia. She always told him where she was going and if she was going to be late. She was never late picking up the kids. After leaving Alicia's workplace, he drove around all the shops and restaurants she frequented. She was nowhere to be found. When he returned home and paid the babysitter, he realized it was late and no one had eaten dinner yet. He sat the children down at the table with a hearty dinner of fish sticks and French fries and made a few more calls. When he called his mother again, she insisted that he come over and she would help him however she could. She could watch the children too. Now Jason was really worried. He hadn't seen his wife since he kissed her goodbye that morning. He thought about everything he could think of, but couldn't come up with a single clue, a single hint that might help him figure out where she was. He couldn't remember doing or saying anything wrong that might have upset her. There was nothing, no reason, no clue, nothing. And worst of all, there was no Alicia. When Jason's mother arrived, She immediately began giving orders. She tidied up the kitchen, put the children to bed, and read them a story. She told Jason to call the police. When the children were asleep, she went downstairs and found Jason sitting on the sofa with his head in his hands. "What did they say?" she asked in a quiet but concerned voice. "They said her report didn't meet their criteria. They advised us to check the nearest prisons and hospitals. Maybe she ended up there." "My God, they didn't say that, did they?" "Yes, and a lot more. They said they don't actively search for missing people. They won't look for someone just because someone said they're missing. And they had the nerve to tell me that she's an adult and can do whatever she wants, go wherever she wants, and be with whomever she wants. She doesn't have to tell me anything. Damn, it was like they told me that if she didn't turn up dead, they wouldn't do anything. They don't care. What are you going to do?" "I called both hospitals, but she's not there. I called the police stations in all 4 neighboring counties, but they don't have any information about her either. I called her boss again and really freaked him out. No one knows anything. She's nowhere to be found. She's vanished into thin air." "Jason, I understand you're upset, but please, watch your language." "I'm sorry, Mom, I just don't know what to do. Every few minutes, I look up and wait for the door to open and Alicia to walk in. I jump up at every passing car or door slam. I keep looking out the window, but there's nothing there. Mom, this is driving me crazy. I want to do something other than sit here and worry, but I don't know what. I can't tell you what to do because I don't know myself. But I know that when she comes home, I'm going to give her hell for putting you through this. And don't tell me I can't. I'm going to tell her exactly what I think, and she'll have to live with it." May 21st, 1987, Thursday. Before sunrise, Jason was already in his car on his way to Alicia's work. He hadn't slept all night, looked terrible, and felt even worse. Before getting behind the wheel, he found time to wash his face and wipe away his tears. He parked next to Alicia's car again. Using a spare key, he opened the front door and got in. He checked everywhere. The glove compartment, under the seats, behind the sun visors, in the ashtray, everywhere. He found no clue that could tell him where she was. The trunk was the same, nothing unusual, no clues, nothing. There was nothing in front of him except the engine under the hood. He got back behind the wheel and started the car. The radio came on, and the music from her favorite station began to play. The gas tank was almost full. Everything was fine. He slammed his hand on the steering wheel and cursed so loudly that any sailor would have envied him. Then he rested his head on the steering wheel. "Jason, I thought it was you." Alicia's boss, Barb, stood in front of the car with a worried look on her face. "She didn't come home last night?" Jason just shook his head. He didn't want her to see his face. "Did you call the police?" "They said there was nothing they could do." Her worried expression turned to anger. "I'll take care of it." She walked decisively into the office and disappeared. Jason just sat behind the wheel, staring into space. About 10 minutes passed when a police car pulled into the parking lot. Barb came out of the building, walked over to the car, and talked to the officer. After a brief conversation, Barb and the officer approached Jason. Barb walked over and put her hand on Jason's shoulder. "Jason, this is my nephew, Ted Parker. He'll see what he can do to help. At the very least, he'll take a missing person report, right, Teddy?" "I'll take care of it, Aunt Barb. You go home, and we'll stop by when we're done." The young man was very different from the dispatcher who had called the night before. He seemed interested and caring. He really wanted to help Jason. He asked a lot of questions, many of which seemed irrelevant to Jason, but he answered them to the best of his knowledge. The police officer searched the car again and looked in places Jason hadn't thought of, such as the gap between the seat and the backrest and the first aid kit. He even removed the spare tire and looked under it. Like Jason, he found nothing. He advised them to take the car home, lock it, and not touch anything in case they needed to look at it again. After parking, the two men went to the office. Barb showed them Alicia's office and what she had been working on. It was a large open space littered with boxes of papers, documents, photographs, and other odds and ends related to the estate settlement process. Barb turned on the computer and helped the officer look through the documents. They didn't find anything obvious or useful. The young officer told Barb to lock up the computer and, if possible, everything in her office. Once he filed a missing person report, other officers would come to take a closer look at what he had already done. He did everything he could to calm Jason down, but it didn't help much. When the officer left, Jason was almost shaking. Like last night, there was nothing he could do. Alicia was gone. and he was unable to do anything useful. He decided to go home and return for her car later. On the way home, he drove around dozens of streets. He drove all over the city looking for her. He even stopped at places she would never go. He just drove without thinking, going wherever his car took him. When he got home, there was a message on the answering machine. He quickly rewound the tape and listened, hoping it was Alicia. It was his secretary from work asking where he was. In his rush to find his wife, Jason had forgotten to call work and say he would be taking a day or two off. He called his boss and explained the situation. His boss told him to do what he had to do and take as much time as he needed. He had a great boss. Jason's mother took the children to the park, and he stayed home alone with his thoughts. He sat down at the kitchen table and sipped his soda. His thoughts were racing in 1,000 directions. He had 1,000 questions. What if she was lying in a ditch, injured and unable to call for help? What if she was wandering around town with amnesia? What if she had been kidnapped? What if it was something else? Dozens of what-if scenarios filled his head, even the most implausible ones. When he thought about her running away with another man, he immediately dismissed the idea. It was so unlike Alicia that it was simply absurd. The mere thought made his head spin. He put his phone on the table and dozed off. When Jason looked up from the table, it was already dark. The house was quiet. Usually, he could hear the sounds of children playing or the TV, but now Jason heard only the ominous silence of emptiness. The only sign of life was the light in the living room. Jason entered the room and saw his mother sitting in an armchair next to a small lamp reading a magazine. "Hi," Jason muttered indistinctly. "Hi, how are you feeling?" "My neck is stiff, everything hurts, but mostly I feel like, well, you know." "I know. Listen, I took the kids to your sister's. They can stay there overnight or as long as they need to. I told everyone what's going on and they're just as worried as you are. I even told Pastor Benningfield, and he said there would be a special prayer for you and Alicia on Sunday. Jason, dear, everyone loves you and wants to help you. If you say the word, we can have an army of people here in no time to do whatever they can. I've moved into the spare room and will stay there until everything is sorted out. Now go upstairs and take a shower. I'll have dinner ready when you come down." Jason turned to go upstairs, but stopped halfway. He turned back, walked over to his mother, put his arms around her shoulders and hugged her, just as he had done when he fell off his bike as a child and skinned his knee. Jason needed his mother's love very much right now. May 25th, 1987, Monday. Alicia was gone. She was nowhere to be found. Jason spent Saturday and Sunday driving around the neighborhood trying to find her. It was good that gas prices had gone down after the catastrophic shortage a few years ago, but 95 cents a gallon was still a lot. He talked to everyone she knew, as well as many strangers. Alicia had no close relatives, so she had no one to visit. Her father had died when she was a teenager, and her mother had died a year after she got married. She had no brothers or sisters, and all her cousins lived in different parts of the country. Jason called all the distant relatives whose names and phone numbers were on the Christmas card list, but no one had seen her or heard from her. Barb helped bring Elisha's car home and spent Saturday morning talking to her and trying to be as helpful as possible. On Sunday afternoon, all of Jason's brothers and sisters arrived with their families to give her as much support as they could. The day ended like most family reunions, everyone eating pizza in the backyard. It was a dreary dinner, but people had to eat. On Monday, instead of going to work as usual, Jason sat in the backyard staring at the fence when his mom crept up behind him. "Jason, there's a detective here for you." "Mr. Woods, I'm Detective Ambrose. I have Officer Parker's report, and I'd like to ask you a few questions." "Okay, have a seat. Would you like something to drink?" "No, thank you, sir. I won't take up much of your time. Please understand that some of my questions may be personal or painful, but if we are going to proceed, we need all the information we can get." "I understand. I'll tell you everything I can," Jason said in a rather subdued tone. "I won't repeat the basic information that's already in the report, but can you tell me when you last saw your wife?" "On Wednesday morning, I kissed her goodbye when I left for work. Around 7:30, I think. She was supposed to go to work that day too, but she never showed up." "How was your relationship with your wife? Did you have any arguments or was she upset about anything?" "Nothing. Everything was fine. On Tuesday, we had dinner with the kids, like we do every night, sat around, talked, and watched TV until we went to bed. As far as I could tell, she wasn't worried about anything. We hadn't argued in months. The best word I can use to describe the situation is normal. How is your relationship with your wife? Is everything okay in the bedroom? I understand that this is a very personal question, but we need to understand your relationship with Mrs. Woods. Everything is fine in that regard as well. On Tuesday night, we made love as usual. Looking back, I can't say that there was anything unusual in our lives. Does Mrs. Woods have any close friends who could shed light on her life before she disappeared or her current whereabouts, especially male friends? I will compile a list of all our friends and everyone she worked with. As for close male friends, I don't think she had any. She worked with several men, but I don't think she was close to any of them. Her closest friend at work is her boss, Barbara Ross, and her best friend from college is Linda Waters. I'll give you their names and phone numbers. And before you ask, no, I don't think she was seeing anyone behind my back. That's not her character. She would never cheat on me. Have you checked your bank accounts, savings, etc.? Do you know if any of her personal items of sentimental value are missing? Sometimes when people disappear, they take as much money and all their important and valuable items with them. No, it didn't occur to me to check our checking and savings accounts. I'll go to the bank and get a statement of all recent transactions. We don't have a safe or anything like that. We don't have any stocks, bonds, or certificates of deposit that could be missing. I'll also get statements for all of our credit cards. We only have one. Mr. Woods, do you love your wife? Jason was silent for a long time, trying to understand what he was being asked. The question was too simple, so it must have been a trick question. Of course, I love my wife. I'm just going crazy. I have no idea where she is, and I can't get anyone to pay attention to the fact that she's missing. I don't understand what's going on. Hell, she could be wandering the streets with amnesia, or some idiot could have kidnapped her. Of course, I love my wife. I just want her to come home. I'm sorry, but I have to ask. Have you always been faithful to your wife? Of course. What kind of question is that? I love my wife. I would never do anything to hurt her or our children. That's ridiculous. I'm sorry again. Could you tell me where you were on Wednesday when she went missing? I was at work. 20 people can confirm that. Check with them. And on Tuesday evening? You said that you were watching TV together that evening, talking and making love. Where were the children? They were in their rooms, asleep. How old are your children? Jeremy is 5 and Bethany is 3. No one else can confirm that you were both at home that evening? No, I don't think so. What are you getting at? Nothing. Just trying to understand how everyone left before you called and found her car near her work. One last question, if you can. Give me one reason why your wife would leave without saying a word to you and abandon her children. I've thought long and hard and I can't think of one. She loves her children as much as I do, and she would die if she were away from them. That means she can't contact us. Some psychopath is holding her and won't let her call. You have to find her before something happens to her. I'll die if anything happens to her. Please find her. I'm begging you. We'll do everything we can, Mr. Woods. Just let us do what we do, and I'll let you know if we find anything. When you can, give me the names and phone numbers of everyone I can talk to who might have any information. And when you get the bank details, give me a copy. I think that's all for today. Thank you for your cooperation. I'll be in touch as soon as I find out anything. All the best, sir. Jason was so excited that he couldn't get back to the fence. As soon as the detective drove away, he jumped into his car and drove to the bank to get the financial information for the detective. After handing the documents over to the police station, he drove around town again looking for Alicia. He didn't return until late afternoon. July 4th, 1987, Saturday. 6 weeks ago, Alicia disappeared without a trace. The Woods' house was quiet. Jason was living like a zombie. His mother had to tell him when to eat and when to wash, even remind him that he had a job and responsibilities. But his heart didn't lie. There was a huge hole in his chest. There was no news about Alicia. The police found nothing that could help with the investigation. There were no unidentified bodies in this state or the neighboring states, which was good news. But that was all. The police towed Alicia's car to the garage and searched it thoroughly, but they found nothing. The police searched their house but found nothing suspicious. No money was missing from their accounts, no personal belongings were missing. They interviewed friends, neighbors, colleagues, churchgoers, and business owners throughout the city. Her photo was shown in hotels and restaurants, but nothing came of it. Hundreds of hours of phone calls and interviews yielded nothing. Nothing at all. The police had no more clues about what had happened to her than Jason did. She had simply vanished into thin air. On July 4th, Jason's brothers and sisters arrived with their families, hoping that their loved ones would help. But they didn't help. Early in the evening, someone out of their mind asked Jason if he suspected Alicia had a boyfriend. This angered him like 4th of July fireworks. He started yelling and screaming at everyone, and even swung at his older brother. 3 men struggled to restrain him and dragged him into the house. He continued to yell and scream at everyone until his mother pushed her way through the crowd and stood face to face with him. He even yelled at her until she hugged him around the chest and began to hold him. Jason stopped screaming and began to sob uncontrollably on her shoulder. Everyone quietly backed away, leaving them alone with their tears. The worst part was that Jason didn't know if Alicia was alive or dead. He knew nothing. If she were dead, he would have a body to mourn over. If he found out that she had run away with another man, he might have been able to come to terms with it someday. It would have been unpleasant, but at least he would have known something. Not knowing was much worse than knowing. Not knowing. He couldn't finish what he had started. September 8th, 1987, Tuesday. Alicia had been missing for almost 4 months. The police had classified her disappearance as not requiring immediate attention, but had sent the necessary information about the missing person to the FBI in Washington. They had done everything they could, and there was nothing more they could do. She was gone, and they had other, more pressing problems. Jason was still walking around like a zombie. He went to work and did what he had to do, but he no longer had the same enthusiasm. He went to the grocery store when there was nothing left to eat in the house. He played with the kids. When the lawn needed mowing, he mowed it. Sometimes he drove around the neighborhood looking for Alicia, and when he returned, he felt emotionally drained. Wherever he went, he looked at the people in the crowd and imagined he saw her among them. But every time he saw her, it was only in his imagination. She wasn't there. After work, Jason made an appointment to see a psychologist. Jason preferred to use the term psychologist rather than psychiatrist. He didn't want to believe he was going crazy. He was just very sad. A psychologist is a professional who works with people who have lost loved ones through divorce, death, or, as in Jason's case, disappearance. For an hour, Jason poured his heart out to the man sitting across from him. Occasionally, Dr. Harper asked questions to clarify what Jason was saying, but mostly he just listened and took notes. Several times, Jason broke down in tears, but the kind doctor simply handed him a box of tissues. Jason left the office exhausted. The doctor stayed behind and reviewed his notes, knowing exactly what steps he needed to take to get Jason back to a normal life. They both had a long road ahead of them. "How was your first session with Dr. Harper?" Jason's mother asked as soon as he sat down at the table for dinner. "I don't know. He just listened to me mumble something. He hardly said a word himself. I hope not all the sessions will be like that because soon I won't have anything to say. I understand that he's the best person for this situation. Just be patient with him and remember that he's here to help you. You can't do this on your own. Now shut up and eat your dinner." "Yes, Mom." December 25th, 1987, Friday. Alicia had been gone for 7 months. It was Christmas, a day of goodwill and cheer for everyone except Jason. The sessions with Dr. Harper had been helpful. Jason realized that Alicia's disappearance was like the death of a loved one. The stages of grief were the same. The only difference was that in the case of a death, there was a body, something tangible that could be touched and mourned. In the case of disappearance, only memories remained. That was much harder to deal with. Jason was in the process of overcoming his depression. Before he could come to terms with what had happened, he had to overcome his depression, or at least push it aside. At 6 in the morning, Jeremy and Bethany were unwrapping presents downstairs. Jason and his mother stumbled on the stairs when they heard screams and cries from below. For the first time in months, Jason smiled. He smiled as he watched the 2 little ones dive into a sea of presents. For a moment, the whole world focused on the 2 little children under the decorated Christmas tree, sitting among a pile of wrapping paper. For a moment, everything was as it should be. Then, Alicia appeared in his thoughts, and the smile disappeared. "Merry Christmas, son," said his mother, handing him a box wrapped in bright red paper. Jason took the box and smiled again. He reached under the sofa cushion and pulled out his little box. "Thanks, Mom. Here's your present. Merry Christmas." Jason unwrapped the gift, a new camera. He had never had a good camera. He had a small camera in a box that he just had to point, shoot, and develop. This was a top-of-the-line Canon EOS Rebel 35mm camera with all the bells and whistles and lots of boxes of film. I want you to take pictures of my grandchildren. I want to spend my last years looking through the albums you've created and watching your children grow up in those photos. I want you to get out of the house and take them places, live again, play with them, do whatever it takes to get back to life. Maybe you can even teach me how to use this thing so I can take pictures of you with your kids. Jason looked at the treasure in his hands. He knew exactly what it was. It was a tool that would help him see his children and enjoy life again. And maybe with it, he could move forward instead of standing still and wallowing in his misery. It was the best gift he had ever received. "Open your present," Jason asked. She opened the small box and found a gold bracelet with charms inside. Each link in the chain represented a letter of the alphabet, and at the end were the words, "Thank you for everything, with love." 7 keychains hung from the chain, one for each of her children. She looked at Jason and smiled from ear to ear. Only when Bethany fidgeted and tried to take the gold bracelet for herself did she wrap it around her wrist and clasp it in her hand. It was her bracelet, and it meant everything to her. Her son was returning after an unimaginable tragedy that had taken him away from everyone. "Thank you, God," she thought to herself. The children were playing with their new toys while their mother prepared breakfast. So Jason sneaked into the room and closed the door. He sat at the table reading one of the newspapers from the stack on the table when his mother knocked softly on the door and opened it. She looked at what he was doing, then at him. "I just want you to know that I'm not a spy or a nag, but I sometimes clean up around here. I know what this is. It's your will. I'm not going to apologize, but I read it. I think what you're doing is wonderful, taking care of Jeremy and Bethany's well-being after you die. It's the right thing to do. But I also took out the trash and found a note that made me realize you're not just thinking about their well-being. You're thinking about your death. You're planning things I can't even imagine. Don't try to tell me I'm an old woman and I'm delusional, because I'm not. This is real. If you think your children will be better off without you, then you're insane. They've already lost their mother. Don't make them go through losing their father, too. Think about those you will leave behind, about the pain and suffering you will cause them. Think about how Alicia felt when she left. We will feel just as bad as you do. Think about us. Don't do what you're thinking of doing, I beg you." Jason looked sadly at the wisest person he had ever known. He was ashamed that she was right. He was a fool to even think about what he was going to do. After the vacation, he would have to talk to Dr. Harper about it. "Come on, breakfast is ready," his mother said solemnly. May 20th, 1988, Friday. "Jason, what are you doing here?" Barbara Ross walked over and put her hand on his shoulder. They were both standing in the parking lot in front of the office where Alicia had worked a year ago. It had been exactly 1 year since she disappeared. For Jason, that year had been filled with pain and fear. The worst part was telling his 2 young children that their mother would never come home again. He had to tell them that she wasn't in heaven when they asked him childishly if she was dead. He couldn't tell them where she was. He just cried and hugged them. He cried a lot. "I have nowhere to go," Jason sobbed. "When someone dies, you can go to the cemetery, visit them on their birthday or the anniversary of their death. But when someone just leaves and disappears, you have nowhere to go." Today marks a year since Alicia disappeared. I decided to go to the place where I last saw her, here, to this parking lot. I don't know what else to do. Jason stood with his head down and his hands in his pockets. He was crying openly. With one foot, he kicked a small pebble off the sidewalk, not knowing what else to do. A year had passed, and the pain was as strong and real as it had been on the first day. Barb came over and hugged the grieving man. "Let's go inside. I'll get you a cup of coffee. Maybe Harry has something stronger we can add. We'll remember our friend together." Holding hands, they crossed the parking lot and entered a small office building, leaving a trail of tears behind them. Chapter 2. Ghosts. The ghosts of the past that haunt us in the present also belong to the present moment. To observe them deeply, to understand their nature, and to transform them is to transform the past. Thich Nhat Hanh, June 25th, 2011, Saturday. "So what God has joined together, let no man put asunder. I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may kiss the bride." Jenny and Tom kissed for the first time as Mr. and Mrs. Littleton. Sisters Jenny, Bethany, and Rose smiled on one side, while brothers Jeremy and Robert smiled on the other. Tom's two brothers and two sisters completed the group of 8 bridesmaids and groomsmen on the platform. Everything was going perfectly. So far, everything had gone smoothly. Maureen held Jason's hand tightly as the bridal party passed them on their way to the church exit. Jenny winked as she walked down the aisle, noticing the tears on her mother's face and the broad, proud smile on her father's. It was the happiest day of her life. She knew nothing of the anguish that lay hidden in her parents' hearts. The reception was lavish, the food exquisite, and the orchestra played loudly. Everyone praised the bride's parents for such a beautiful daughter. Jason was the picture of a proud and happy father, but Maureen kept her distance, watching him closely. Everything was going perfectly. When the reception began to wind down and only the most serious guests continued to dance and drink, Jason and Maureen walked through the kitchen and found an empty picnic table under the trees where they could sit and rest. Maureen sat down on the bench and leaned her head against her husband's shoulder. "That was the most beautiful wedding I've ever seen," said the proud mother, looking around for curious eyes and ears. "And we were magnificent too. We smiled the whole time and no one suspected a thing. How are you?" "My face hurts. I think I used smile muscles I've never used before. I won't let anything ruin this day for our little girl. If I had to, I'd glue a smile on my face. 4 down, 1 to go." "What? What do you mean?" "4 of our children are married and only our little Rose is left at home. When she leaves, we can go on the second honeymoon we've always dreamed of. Sunny Italy, gondolas, cathedrals, pasta, wine, and everything we see in tourist brochures. Just you and me in a small country villa drinking wine and making love all day long." "Sounds wonderful." A light breeze blew through the trees, and the two runaways from the wedding sat quietly, huddled together. There was a calmness in their eyes, like before a storm. At that moment, everything was quiet and peaceful, but they knew that a storm of disagreements and emotions would soon erupt. But that would be tomorrow. Today was a day of love, new beginnings, and celebration. Tomorrow would come very soon. "Jason, have you ever thought about us getting married?" "From time to time when I need to cheer myself up. This is one of the happiest days of my life. Marrying you has made me whole. I'm happy again. Why do you ask? You never had any doubts?" "Never. From the moment I met you, I knew you were my destiny. You had to convince me a little, but I understood everything right away. Thank God for friends like Cliff and Willow. If they hadn't taken pity on us, we wouldn't be here now." "Yes, they're good friends. I wasn't sure about their invitation that weekend. I thought I was just a poor old widow with 2 kids that they felt sorry for and invited to a barbecue. I almost declined. It wasn't until much later that I found out they invited me so I could meet you. Willow told me they thought we'd get along and maybe help each other heal. How right they were. And Cliff told me that their wonderful friend, who I have a lot in common with and whom I've already met, would be there too. I thought you were as mentally ill as I am, but he meant that we both have 2 children and lost our first loves. When I saw the barbecue sauce dripping down your chest, I fell in love." Maureen looked into his eyes and repeated the words she had said 1,000 times before. "I love you too." Her words echoed in the silence. June 27th, 2011, Monday. "Hello. Hello, Mrs. Woods. This is Officer Pellegrino from the county police. I'm calling to let you and your husband know that we have some additional information about Alicia Woods. If possible, we would like you to come to the station so we can tell you what we know. We'll be here until 6. How about 5? I'll call my husband and see if he agrees, but I think we should be there at 5. If we don't call you back, please wait for us there." "That works for me. Yes, and by the way, the Seattle police would also like to speak with Mr. Woods. I'll see you at 5. Jason and Maureen entered the South Precinct at exactly 5 o'clock, holding hands. Detective Scanlon met them at the entrance and led them to a conference room on the 2nd floor. Officer Pellegrino was already sitting at his desk, reviewing documents. Detective Scanlon began the conversation. "I'm glad you could make it. Mr. Woods, we have some additional information about your ex-wife. I understand this may be painful, and if you need a break, just let us know and we'll take a break. Before we begin, would you like anything to drink? Maybe some soda or water? I wouldn't recommend coffee." "Soda would be fine," Maureen replied for both of them. "Diet, if you have it." When everyone had their drinks, Officer Pellegrino began the briefing. "Mr. and Mrs. Woods, here's what we know. The Seattle Police Department sent us an extensive file on Christine Marks, or Alicia Woods, as you knew her. As we've already told you, authorities took her into custody in connection with her husband's death. Mrs. Marks was married to Thomas J. Marks. He was a truck driver, and they lived in a Seattle suburb called Cottage Lake. Mr. Marks died last week when an acetylene tank exploded in his truck during an argument. The police suspect that someone tampered with the valve. They are awaiting results from the coroner's office and the crime lab, but Mrs. Marks has been taken into custody. During the investigation, her fingerprints were checked against the FBI database. They turned out to belong to a man from Baltimore who went missing in 1987, your ex-husband. At that point, they realized they hadn't found what they were hoping for. After further investigation, it was discovered that she had been married twice in California and Arizona. Both of her previous husbands also died under mysterious circumstances. Based on this information, she was placed on a wanted list and taken into custody. No official charges have been filed yet, but as she is a suspect in a murder investigation, she will remain in custody until the results are ready for indictment or release. Mrs. Marks works at a travel agency near their home. A check of her finances showed that she is a fairly wealthy woman. Seattle police are now reconstructing her movements from the time she disappeared in Baltimore until she arrived in Washington. They have agreed to pass on anything they find as soon as they have finished processing the paperwork. Given how much information is available these days, it shouldn't be difficult to track her movements. At that moment, Detective Scanlon interrupted them and said, "How's it going, guys? Maybe you need to take a few minutes break?" Maureen had been holding Jason's hand throughout the conversation. Although she could feel him squeezing her hand tightly, the blood circulation in his body was not impaired, and she decided that he was fine and could continue. "I think so, for now," Maureen replied. "Okay, let's continue," Officer Pellegrino said. "It appears that she got most of her money from her two ex-husbands. She sold their businesses after they died. She has no children other than the two she left with you. We couldn't find any blood relatives, so we faxed them the list of friends and relatives you gave us in 1987. Mrs. Marks never reported to the police in any of the areas where she lived. It appears that she has been a model citizen for the past 24 years. She traveled extensively and has many visas in her passport. It seems she has traveled all over the world. Well, that's all, unless they sent her mugshot, if you want to see it." "No thank you," Jason said firmly, raising his hand. "Okay, that's all we have for now. Except that the Seattle police would very much like to talk to you. They have your phone number and may call you shortly. This morning, we sent all the records we have on the original missing person case to their office, and we hope that will help them in their investigation of her movements. Do you have any questions?" Maureen looked at Jason, who shook his head. "No." "Thank you for everything," Maureen said to the uniformed police officer. "Call us any time." When they left the building, the warm summer air was like a slap in the face compared to the air conditioning in the office. It was a refreshing slap that calmed Jason, and he was able to loosen his grip on his wife's hand. They walked to the parking lot and got into the car. "That wasn't so bad, was it, honey?" Maureen asked. I don't... No, it wasn't so bad," he finally managed to say. I don't know what I was expecting, but I was afraid of what they were going to say, but it wasn't so bad. Thank you for supporting me." The drive home was silent. June 30th, 2011, Thursday. Jason entered the house through the back door and put his briefcase on the table. Maureen jumped at the sound and ran to the kitchen. "My goodness, you scared me. I didn't know who it was." She kissed him gently on the lips, making a sound that indicated it was not a real kiss, but just a formal greeting. "Did you talk to them?" she asked, pressing herself against him. "Yes." "And what did they say?" "They asked me a bunch of questions that were already in the report, and then they said they wanted me to fly out there and meet her." "And what did you tell them?" "I said I needed to think about it. I don't want to, but I might have to." "Well, if you decide to, I'll be there for you every step of the way." July 6, 2011, Wednesday. Jason and Maureen stood at the door of the train station on Decatur Street, afraid to go in because they both knew what awaited them there. Jason's past and a lot of pain. A young woman in a police cadet uniform opened the door and asked, "Mr. and Mrs. Woods, welcome to Seattle. Please follow me. I'll take you to the conference room." Jason and Maureen, barely able to stand, followed the woman down the hallway. "Please wait here. I'll let them know you're here." She disappeared behind the door. Outside, they could hear voices. First, a deep male voice, then a higher female voice. The tone was argumentative and grew louder with every passing second. The door opened, and Jason saw Alicia for the first time in 24 years. She was standing in front of a desk, her hands on the black surface, shouting at a uniformed officer sitting on the other side. She looked older and a little heavier, but exactly as he remembered her. I said I changed my mind. I don't want to see him. Not now, not ever. Don't you understand English? Jason stood in the hallway watching the scene behind the door when she turned and looked straight at him. Time stopped, and silence fell again in the room. For a long time, nothing happened. No one moved, no one breathed. They just looked at each other and remembered. Slowly but surely, Alicia sat down and said, "Please close the door." The door closed, leaving Jason with no escape. "No, no!" Jason shouted at the closed door. "You can't do this to me again. You can't just disappear like this. It's not fair." He threw himself against the door and began pounding on it with his fists, trying to open it. Maureen hugged the hysterical man and tried to get him to look at her, to see her, to come back to her. But he was so focused on talking to Alicia that he couldn't hear or see anything else. Suddenly, two uniformed police officers ran around the corner and grabbed Jason. They threw him to the ground, and he screamed, "You can't do this to me again, you can't!" After a couple of minutes, Jason calmed down enough to be dragged into another conference room. Maureen followed them, sobbing, watching the man she loved disappear before her eyes. It took a whole hour before everything returned to normal. Apologies were offered from all sides. Two uniformed police officers apologized for thinking there was a crazy criminal in the hallway. Jason apologized for losing his temper and attacking one of the police officers. Jason apologized especially to Maureen, whom he had completely ignored when she tried to help him. "I'm so sorry. I lost it. I lost everything. I hurt you and I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. I love you and I don't want to do this anymore." Despite the intense pain, there was still love in her eyes, and she asked, "Can we go home?" Chapter 3. Rebirth. Every night when I go to bed, I die. And the next morning, when I wake up, I am born again. Mahatma Gandhi. September 24th, 2011, Saturday. Maureen opened the front door and saw her worst nightmare standing on the threshold. "Hello. I'd like to see Jason, please." Alicia said this without the slightest emotion in her voice. Maureen tensed, gripping the doorknob, unable to think of anything to say. The cause of so much suffering and pain stood just a meter away from her, separated only by a thin door. The only time she had seen Alicia with Jason was before he had caused a disturbance at the Seattle police station. Everything she had ever wanted to do to this woman flashed through her mind. "He's not here," Maureen finally said coldly. "He took his daughter shopping. What do you want here?" "I want to talk to him. I didn't expect what happened in Seattle, and I think we need to talk to sort things out." "Well, he won't be back anytime soon. Leave your number, I'll tell him you were here, and if he wants to, he'll call you." I'm on the road, and I don't have a number for where I'm staying yet. "Can I come in and wait?" "I won't bother you. I'll just sit quietly until he gets back." "You don't have to do anything." "I don't know if that's a good idea." "Please, you won't even know I'm here." Maureen tried to think of all the possible scenarios in which it would be wrong to let her in. But in the end, she couldn't believe that any of them could actually happen. And if Jason missed the opportunity to talk to her and get the answers he had been looking for so long, she wouldn't be able to live with herself. But letting them talk would be even worse. It could open the door to other problems. Weighing the pros and cons, she simply said, "Come in." Maureen led her into the living room, and Alicia followed as if she didn't know the way. Of course she did. 24 years ago, she had lived here with Jason and their two children. "You can wait here. I'm cooking something in the oven." Alicia looked around the room as she took off her jacket. Nothing in the room was familiar to her. The last time she had seen it, the walls had been painted an ugly green, and the carpet was beige and stained with the usual children's souvenirs left behind after playtime. The only thing she recognized was an object on the bookcase behind the sofa. It was an old microscope that she and Jason had found at a flea market shortly after their wedding. It reminded her of how they used to spend their weekends together, visiting antique shops, block markets, and garage sales in search of suitable treasures to decorate their home. All that had stopped when the children were born. She glanced at the bookcase and saw an old 35mm camera in a glass case lying next to a stack of photo albums, each with the year printed on the spine, starting with 1990 and ending with 2008. On top of the bookcase was a modern Canon digital camera. Alicia walked over to the fireplace and looked at the large family portrait hanging above the mantelpiece. It was a typical studio portrait. Everyone was dressed in white, sitting barefoot on an idyllic meadow, smiling and pretending to have a casual picnic. It was a beautiful photograph of 6 people she didn't know and Jason. He looked happy, and the way his hand touched his wife's spoke volumes about their connection. Alicia remembered that connection with him. She had experienced that feeling many times since with other men, but nothing compared to that first time. That first time was different, more intense, and she would remember it forever. On the left are Jeremy and Bethany, Maureen said from the doorway. On the right are Robert and Jenny. They're from my first marriage. And the little girl in the middle is Rose. She's our daughter and she's grown so much. I shouldn't know this, but she and her father are at the store right now picking out a gift for my birthday. Maureen entered the room with 2 cups of hot tea. She handed one to Alicia. Here, drink up. I promise there's no poison in it. As much as I'd like to, I wouldn't do anything to hurt Jason. Alicia took the cup and looked at the portrait again. With sadness in her voice, she said, "They've all grown up. Jeremy looks like his father, and Bethany has my eyes. I didn't know how I would feel seeing them again. I wasn't sure, but now I know. I feel... I can't explain how I feel. But Jason seems to have raised them well, very well. And you, of course. Are they good people? They're wonderful children. Both are married. Jeremy and his wife are in the Marine Corps, and Bethany is a teacher with a daughter and another on the way." The 2 women stood in silence, sipping their drinks. Each looked at the other, sizing up her rival. The room was still cool, but not as cold as it had been at the front door. Maureen saw a tall woman in her 50s with long brown hair pulled back into a ponytail that reached the middle of her back. She was wearing jeans and a heavy, colorful ski sweater and looked like she was getting ready to hit the slopes. Expensive cowboy boots completed the stylish outfit. The silver buckle on her belt and the bracelet on her wrist were in a southwestern style, as if a tourist had bought them in a Native American souvenir shop, but in an expensive gift store. She wore almost no makeup, but still had attractive features and bright blue eyes. Alicia looked at Maureen and saw everything she never wanted to be. A 40-something housewife dressed in plain pants and a college sweatshirt with an apron around her waist. She had beautiful light hair cut to suit her skin tone and striking violet eyes. Her tennis shoes had seen better days. She wasn't wearing any makeup, but it didn't seem necessary. Her face glowed with a healthy blush, and her skin was as smooth and soft as could be imagined. "How long have you been married?" Alicia asked. 15 years. "And do you have a daughter?" "Yes, Rose. She's our pride and joy." "I thought Jason always wanted a big family. I remember him saying he wanted a dozen children." "Let's sit down. If we're going to talk, we might as well be comfortable." The 2 women settled down on opposite sides of the coffee table, Alicia on a lounge chair, Maureen on the sofa. Maureen continued, "Yes, he did. When we got married, I already had 2 children, whom Jason adopted. When Rose was born, he said we needed another one. But we discussed it and decided that 5 would be enough. After that, there was no more talk about it. He was never serious about having a dozen children." Both women paused to take a sip from their glasses and catch their breath. They were still tense, but the periodic breathing helped them relax a little. Alicia raised her head above her glass and asked, "Do you know everything about me?" Maureen considered many ways to tell her how much she knew, but decided to be honest and go straight to the point. "I know everything about you. Jason told me everything." "So you know I didn't want children?" "No, I didn't. And if I didn't, then Jason didn't either. If you didn't want children, why did you get married? You have 2 children. Why did you have them?" Alicia looked down at the glass in her hands and said, "I love Jason. We had a good time together. I thought we could do everything I had always dreamed of. Travel, visit exotic places, climb mountains, ride motorcycles, go to Paris and climb the Eiffel Tower. See the pyramids, everything I had read about and dreamed of since childhood. But when I found out I was pregnant with Jeremy, Jason started making plans for a house, school, renovations, all those mundane things. I realized that we would never be able to fulfill all my dreams. We would have children, jobs, a mortgage, responsibilities, and we would never see Paris or the pyramids. Shortly after Jeremy was born, I got pregnant again, this time with Bethany. Jason was happier than ever, but all I could think about was being stuck at home and turning into a baby-making machine. I imagined a house with 12 kids running around. I was miserable. Did you tell Jason about this?" We talked about it, but Jason was so happy playing with the kids and bragging about them to the neighbors that I didn't want to disappoint him by saying I didn't want any more. I knew it would hurt him, so I don't think I ever said it directly, just hinted at it. He never knew you didn't want more children? Didn't you think he would want to know? I told him I couldn't tell him. I just couldn't make him unhappy. And you just walked away from him. Leaving wouldn't have made him unhappy? No, yes, no, it's not like that. I didn't want to hurt him. I had dreams that were shattered when the children came along. I wanted to do everything I had always dreamed of, and do it while I was still young enough to enjoy it. I knew he couldn't do anything while we had children, so I decided it was better for us to separate. And you told him that? No, not exactly. He could see how unhappy I was. He must have known what was coming. My God, did you think he could read your mind? Did you think he knew? How could you be so stupid? He didn't know anything. He loved you. He loved the children. Ali, he had no idea. Alicia stared motionless into her cup, and Maureen leaned over the coffee table and began to reproach the woman for her stupidity. Suddenly, Maureen realized that she was ready to strangle this idiot. She took a deep breath, leaned back against the sofa, and stared into her cup. It took quite a while before the tension eased enough for them to speak again. Moran asked, "Please tell me how you managed to do the impossible. Disappear into thin air. That's the only thing that baffled everyone, even the police." Alicia smiled as if proud of what she had done. It was actually very simple. I worked for a company that helped people liquidate the property of deceased relatives who had left behind a lot of things. Most people didn't want to rummage through furniture, personal belongings, and papers that usually accumulate over a lifetime, so we did everything for them. In a stack of papers from one of the estates I was working on, I found the birth certificate of a woman who was only a few years younger than me. I asked her relatives about her and learned that she was a mentally and physically disabled woman who lived with her relatives. They said she had no chance of a full life and was doomed to live with her relatives until she died. Her name was Christina Barnett. That gave me everything I needed to make it work. I had a birth certificate, which I used to get a driver's license, and then a social security number and a credit card. I even bought a used car under my new name. I cashed in a bunch of bonds that no one knew about, and that I had inherited after my mother died. So I had enough money to do everything I needed to do. When I came to Charlie, I became Christina Barnett. You talk about leaving as casually as going to the store for cereal. Your planning must have taken weeks or months. This wasn't a spontaneous decision. You planned and executed everything with exceptional precision. But you had no idea what you were leaving behind, right? I thought about it, but I knew everything would be fine. Jason would be okay. He was a good father and took good care of the children. Of course, he would miss me for a while, but he would move on, and looking at you, it seems like he's doing well. Everyone froze, and Maureen just sat there staring at him in amazement. Then her expression changed to one of curiosity. She furrowed her brow, pressed her lips together, and her violet eyes fixed on the woman. "I think I'm missing something," Maureen said, almost hissing. "Who was Charlie?" "Oh, I think I missed that part. Charlie was a member of a family I was working for. We became close while working on his aunt's papers. He lived in Texas, and when I was away, I would visit him." "How close were you?" "Well, let's just say we were good friends and leave it at that." "No, we're not leaving it at that. Either you tell me everything about you and Charlie, or I'm going to walk over to that table and beat the truth out of you." Okay, don't threaten me. It was a long time ago, so it doesn't matter what you know. Charlie and I were lovers for a few months before I left. We saw each other a couple of times a month, usually at the Holiday Inn in Ellicott City. We had a good time together, and he promised that when I left Jason and we were together, he would show me the world. We would climb mountains and explore Fiji. Around that time, I found Christina's birth certificate. A couple of months later, I had everything I needed and went to Texas to be with him. The only problem was that he already had a wife and family, so I just kept going. I ended up in Phoenix and, well, did you cheat on Jason? You could say that. I had already decided to leave him, but Charlie just sped things up a bit and suggested where to go. Things didn't go quite as I had planned, but it was too late to turn back. And you never looked back? I felt bad leaving my 2 kids with Jason, but I knew he could handle it. He was a strong man, and raising kids came easy to him. I felt guilty sometimes, but I just looked ahead and tried not to think about the past. And then? Well, I ended up marrying a man who owned a motorcycle shop in Phoenix. We traveled a lot in the Southwest, Mexico, and even Canada. He died in Texas when his Harley crashed into an armored car that threw him into oncoming traffic. I sold the motorcycle shop and moved to Sacramento. A few years later, I met and married a man who owned a small vineyard in Napa Valley. He taught me everything about winemaking. We traveled extensively throughout Asia, the South Pacific, and Alaska while he promoted his wines. He developed a particularly aggressive form of cancer, and when he became very ill, he took his own life. We had been together for 8 years. I sold the vineyard and moved to Seattle, where I met Tom. Tom was a truck driver. I often went on trips with him. We had a good time until a welding tank exploded in front of him. The police decided I was some kind of black widow because my husbands had died tragically. It was just bureaucratic confusion, but they found out my real identity and about Jason. At first, I didn't want to see him, but they insisted, and eventually I agreed. When I found out he was at the door, I chickened out and said I didn't want to see him. I could hear him shouting behind the closed door. I regret doing that. I don't understand why he said those things and got so angry. Inside, Maureen was boiling with rage. On the outside, it showed only in her steely gaze and clenched teeth. She couldn't believe what she had just heard. The woman who had once been married to the man she loved more than anything in the world was talking about men in love as if they were a dish served at dinner. Take a spoon, enjoy it while it lasts, and move on to the next course. Get what you want and move on. Maureen couldn't think straight, she was so angry. The only thing she could say was the following. So you never went to Paris? The question sounded rather sarcastic. Oh, I went to Paris with Gordon, or was it Gary? Anyway, he was just a friend. I went to Fiji with Elroy and to Egypt with someone whose name I can't remember right now. I've been to a lot of places and seen a lot, but not as much as I dreamed of as a child. I want to see everything and do everything before I die. My favorite place was a small village in Italy, not far from Florence, called San Gimignano. I spent a month there with Pablo. That's where I'm going now. In 2 days, I have a flight from New York to Florence. I'll try to find a small villa in Tuscany to live in. And then, who knows? You're such a slut, aren't you? How many men did you sleep with while you were married to Jason? I didn't even look at other men except Charlie until I left. I was a good wife. Maureen was still reeling and so angry she could have squeezed a piece of coal into a diamond. If she had a gun, there would be a dead body sitting in the chair across from her right now. But there was no gun or any other weapon nearby. She was thinking about what to do and what to say when an idea popped into her head. Excuse me, I'll get us something else to drink. Maureen took 2 cups and went to the kitchen. She wanted to throw away the cup Alicia had been drinking from, but the window had been boarded up for several months, and Jason had promised to fix it. Instead, she just put the cups in the sink and got some clean ones. Returning to the living room with fresh tea, she settled back on the sofa and began her story. You were kind enough to tell me about your interesting life after leaving Baltimore, so I think it would be appropriate to tell you about ours, Maureen said with a slight smile on her face. Well, I'll start with the day you left. It was Wednesday, May 20th, if I remember correctly. The nanny called Jason and was worried when you didn't pick up Jeremy and Bethany, so Jason went to get them. He waited for you to come home, but you never showed up. He called everyone he could think of, but no one had seen you all day. Your car was found in the parking lot at work, and it seemed like you had just vanished. Your coworkers looked for you. Jason drove all over town, and when he started asking the police about you, they joined the search. The first few days were desperate. He imagined you lying in a ditch, unable to call. He thought you might have been kidnapped. Either way, he was completely distraught. There was an article about you in the newspaper suggesting that Jason might have killed you and hidden your body. That's what the police believed for a while. His mother moved here to take care of the children and help him with everything he needed. But he needed you. There was no sign of you. Jason said you had disappeared into thin air. Eventually, he went back to work. It helped him regain some sense of normalcy, but he wasn't the same anymore. On weekends, he would go out searching, calling everyone Jason and you knew, contacting every police department in Maryland, and even placing missing person ads in local newspapers, but nothing, not a single lead. Christmas that year was especially hard for him. By then, he was seeing a therapist, but it wasn't helping, and he was deeply depressed. So much so that he decided to end his life. His mother found out before he could do anything serious and talked him out of it. You should know that she never said a bad word about you. Both she and Jason hoped that one day you would come home. Everywhere he went, he thought he saw you. But one day he just gave up. Everyone did everything they could to find you. But you weren't there. His life was empty. He felt like his life was over. He had to explain to Jeremy and Bethany that you were gone and not coming back. They thought you were dead, but he told them you weren't in heaven. He didn't know where you were. He asked them to pray that you would come home someday. But you didn't come home. On the anniversary of your disappearance, May 20th, your former boss Barbara found Jason in the parking lot where you used to work, crying and talking to himself. He was in a daze, and Barbara helped him into the building. She tried to talk to him and even gave him something to drink, but he just sat on the floor and cried. He kept repeating, "Please don't go," over and over again. They couldn't calm him down and eventually called an ambulance. He was taken to the hospital, where he spent the next 3 months in a psychiatric ward. He had a nervous breakdown. Today, it's called post-traumatic stress disorder. Just a fancy name for losing the ability to think straight. Same problem, different name. Whatever you want to call it, Jason went crazy and lost touch with reality. And it's all because of you. All because of you. Because you left and disappeared like dust in the wind. When you left him, you did it in the most horrible way possible. You couldn't have found a more despicable and contemptible way. If you had slept around and laughed in his face, he would have been humiliated and crushed. But at least he would have had a valid reason to break up with you. That would have been much easier than just disappearing. You left a huge hole in his life that was impossible to fill. He went crazy for a while. The only people who supported him were his family and his boss at work. Everyone else thought he was insane. It took him over a year to recover. After that, he was under the care of a psychiatrist for several years. And all that time, he had no idea what you had done or why. You couldn't have broken him any more than you did, even if you had run him over with a bulldozer. 3 years after you disappeared, someone advised him to file for divorce and move on with his life. He couldn't do it. He always hoped that one day you would just show up at his door. At that moment, he almost lost his mind. It was only 7 years after your disappearance that he was able to make the decision to move on. Filing the paperwork to have you declared dead was the hardest decision of his life. In legal terms, it's called death by absence. He almost died himself letting you go after so many years. All his brothers and sisters, his mother, his boss, and even his therapist were there when he had to stand before the judge and explain why he wanted to declare you dead. It was a solemn day for everyone, and there were enough tears to fill a swimming pool. But he did it. He endured and went on living. Jason and I met at a barbecue at a mutual friend's house. I lost my husband in a car accident a couple of years ago, and Jason was wandering through life without a purpose after your death. They introduced us and left to see what would happen. We talked all day. After that, we started dating as friends and sometimes went out with the kids. The kindest man in the world helped me come to terms with the tragedy of my husband's death and gave me a reason to be happy. As we got to know each other better, he told me he wanted to marry me. But he said he would only do so if I listened to his whole story first. Until then, he had told me almost nothing about you or his problems. We rented a small cabin in the woods by a lake, and for the next 2 days, he told me all the details of his complicated, chaotic life. He even told me about the mental hospital and his therapy sessions. He spent most of the weekend crying and talking. I felt so sorry for him. I was angry at you. I couldn't believe that someone could be so heartless and cruel and do what he told me he had done to him. It was unbelievable. On the third day, we just sat by the lake and held hands. We didn't say a word. That day, I fell in love with him, and I have loved him more and more every day since. A year later, we got married. The following year, Rose was born. We decided to name her Rose because she symbolized our love and rebirth. And even though roses have thorns, we knew that whatever thorns we encountered in life, we would overcome them together. We will be together until one of us dies. Ever since I met Jason, I've been living with your ghost. A ghost that has haunted us as a family ever since you disappeared. An evil ghost, a ghost of uncertainty. I don't know what today will bring, but I pray to God that you will be banished from our lives once and for all. Know this, I will never abandon him like you did. I love him more than you ever could. I will be by his side forever. You almost killed the kindest, most gentle man I've ever met by simply disappearing into thin air. Maureen leaned back in her chair and unclenched her fists. She was so angry she was shaking. But she said it. She said everything she thought, and hopefully that cruel, heartless bitch sitting across the room would understand, at least a little. what she had done. If she never understood, then there was no hope for her. She was nothing more than a rabid dog that needed to be put down. I never knew. I couldn't have known that leaving him would cause him so much pain. Of course you didn't know, you stupid, selfish bitch. All you cared about was yourself, having fun, and all the men who would sleep in your bed. How could you be so damn selfish? The two women looked at each other silently. Mom, we're home. Where are you? Came a voice from the front door. You won't believe what... Rose fell silent when she saw the brunette sitting across from her. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't notice we had guests. Where's your father? Maureen asked. I'm here, Jason said, approaching his daughter. What's going on? Before he could finish his sentence, he saw Alicia at the other end of the room. Although she had her head down, there was no doubt that it was her. Hi, Jason, she whispered, looking at him. He just stood there motionless with his mouth open. Rose, dear, why don't you call Olivia and ask if you can go over to her place for a while? Morin suggested. You can show her your new iPhone. She ushered the girl out of the room and stood in front of Jason, looking him straight in the eyes. She whispered softly, Jason, look at me. You have to do this. You can do it. You're strong. And I know you'll do what you have to do. Just remember that I'll never abandon you. But I'll be in the bedroom. If you call me, I'll come. But I don't think you'll need me. For now, just sit down and talk to her, please. Jason focused on his wife and a small tear appeared in one eye. She was right. He had to do this, no matter how painful it was. Everything would be fine as long as his wife, his love, was by his side. She forced a smile and turned to look once more at the woman sitting in the chair across the room before going upstairs and closing the door. If looks could kill, the brunette would have been dead on the spot. It was almost midnight when Maureen heard a car pull up to the house. She leaned back in the old armchair and looked out the window. She saw Alicia walking down the driveway and getting into a taxi waiting there. The car drove away, and she sat back down in the chair and relaxed, waiting for her husband to come home. An hour passed and she began to worry. She was about to get up and go downstairs to look for him when the door opened. Jason came in looking like a little boy who had just lost his puppy. His swollen red eyes showed that he had been crying, but now they were together, alone in their bedroom. He didn't say a word. He just walked over, knelt down in front of his wife and hugged her legs. He laid his head on her lap and sighed. She reached out and stroked his hair as he breathed quietly. They didn't move for a long time. Maureen broke the silence with a whisper. Are you okay? He lifted his head and looked into her eyes. Yes, actually, I think I am. Things didn't turn out the way I expected, but now it's over. She's gone, and we don't have to worry about her anymore. Right now, I feel like a weight has been lifted off my shoulders. A weight that has been there for 24 years. I still have a lot to go through, but I think I'll be okay. She smiled crookedly, not knowing whether to be happy or sad. Do you want to talk about it? She whispered. Do you want to talk about it? She whispered. Do you want to talk about it? She whispered. Yes, a little. But tomorrow I want to visit my mother and tell you both all the details at the same time. Right now, I'll just tell you the most important things. I don't know if you talked to her before we got home, but she told me why she left. You won't believe it. Do you want to hear it now or tomorrow? What did she say? This is what she said. She said that almost from the day we got married, she had several affairs with men, probably a dozen or more over the years, even when she was pregnant. She said that I never satisfied her in bed and that other men gave her much more pleasure than I did. She met men at work, in bars, and even one at the grocery store. She said that after she left home, she had an endless stream of men, and she even married one of her best lovers. She said it as if she were bragging. I had no idea. Now she appeared to me in a completely different light. I had no idea she was such a slut. God, what a terrible woman I married. I was so in love with who I thought she was and who I thought she should be that I didn't even notice what a disgusting slut she really was. My God, did she really say all that? Yes, and she seemed very proud, almost arrogant. She didn't seem remorseful at all. She didn't shed a tear or apologize. The worst part is that she didn't ask about Jeremy or Bethany. What a heartless bitch. I regret spending even a second worrying about her when I should have been with my family. I'm so sorry she came between us. Nothing like this will ever happen again. It's over, and now we can move on. I love you, Mr. Woods. I always have and always will. Take me to bed and hold me. They stood up and embraced each other tightly like lovers. Words were unnecessary. They communicated through touch. A man and a woman who loved each other so deeply, whose hearts beat in unison. Maureen thought about the lie Alicia had told, the lie that would allow the man embracing her to become whole again, to rid himself of the ghosts and demons of his past once and for all. From this moment on, everything would be fine. A smile played on her lips as she embraced him in return. Jason whispered, "Tomorrow, on the way to Mom's, I want to talk about the second honeymoon I promised you. We deserve it. So I'll take some time off work and we'll go in the spring. What do you think?" "Sounds great, but I don't like Italy anymore. What do you think about Tahiti?" Thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Subscribe to my channel and watch the next video.